How's everybody doing tonight? Fantastic. I'm Steve Hutchinson. I'm founder of Annuity Check. So we're actually going to be filming this tonight. This is actually an educational platform that's being utilized around the United States, and it's advisor level training that we have basically put together because we feel in today's day and age that if it's important for your advisor to understand exactly how these annuity contracts work and how your IRAs work, that it's probably even more important for you as well. Wouldn't you agree? So to help me out with this, because we're going to film, I'm going to go to the back of the room again, and I'm going to kind of run up here. I'd like everybody to scream and clap for me. Can we do that for me? Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, so here we go. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get started tonight, and we have a lot of information to cover so we can get everybody out of here by midnight. How's that sound? Fantastic. So first of all, I need to ask everybody, what did you think of dinner? How was that?
Wonderful.
Well, it's a new vegetarian plate they're bringing out with Fleming's now, so you'll feel a lot lighter by just having a small salad plate. But just kidding. Okay, so we do have a lot of information tonight. Specifically, tonight you're going to be learning a couple things, and we're going to really zero in on a couple really critical areas and kind of over-educate you on some things that we feel are very, very important. So to start with, we're going to be talking about 4 ways that you can increase your annuity income. Now, these aren't tax strategies or anything of that sort. These are actually ways to basically structurally get more out of these investments than what you ordinarily would be able to do. Second, we're going to talk about something called the power of zero, which is particularly important with what we have going on right now in the marketplace. And then lastly, we're going to talk about something that our company actually does that we make available. We're going to show you how to properly evaluate exactly what's happening with an annuity or an IRA in a manner that your advisor can't provide for you and that the carriers won't provide for you. So we'll be talking about that as we go. But once again, this information, while it's going to seem simple, it's actually way more advanced than it would look on the surface. So 4 ways to increase annuity income. Reduce fees and charges, eliminate volatility, avoid income riders, and maximize withdrawals. So I'm going to jump into this first section on reducing fees and charges, but I'm going to present this in a way that's going to give you an entirely different perspective as to how you think about fees and charges in the future. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to talk about when a 1% fee can actually cost you 21%. So how could that be? So to show you the math behind this, I'm going to bring in our hypothetical character. But before I do that, let's think about the perception that we all have of a 1% fee. Most of us think of our wealth as kind of a big pie, our wealth, and that a 1% fee is just a small cut out of the bigger pie. Would you agree with that? Right. It's kind of the perception. So if you're in a bull market, that's great because you really don't need to worry about it. It's just 1%. You're making all this other money. It's all great. So let's go ahead and challenge this a little bit mathematically. And I'm going to bring in our favorite character, Joe. Everything that we're talking about here tonight, and I have to tell you this, is hypothetical, except Joe. Joe's for real. No, okay. So Joe has saved up over his lifetime $200,000 through age 65. Now, I want to make another distinction about this money that Joe saved up. Joe actually went out and worked and physically saved this money up, so it's his principal. So it's Joe's money that he earned, okay? So I'm making that distinction because I'm going to come back to it when I change the way that you look at fees. So Joe has $200,000 through age 65. At age 65, Joe says, I'm going to take this down to the local advisory firm. So he goes down the street, and I'm going to invest my $200,000. So at age 65, Joe invests $200,000, and now we're going to follow this all the way through age 90. Now, to keep this example simple, Joe's going to remain fully invested until his age 90. We're going to show him taking no withdrawals. He's just going to let it grow. And we're going to assume that the account grows at 5%, which generates a growth of $413,000. Now, the reason that it's able to grow at 5%, or at least the perception is, because he got the advice from his advisory firm that they provided him. And as part of that trade-off, Joe agreed to a very simple arrangement. Joe agreed to a 1% fee basically on his account. Now, before I show you the cumulative effects of this 1% fee, let me ask you a question. Do you think Joe pays that annual fee on his growth or on his entire account? Entire account. Okay, so let's take a look at this. As Joe's account grows, so does his 1% fee. So at age 70, it's not accumulated very much, but by the time we get out at age 90, Joe has paid over $86,000 on a 1% fee. Now we have to reduce the effects of this someplace. We have to account for this someplace. So he already had his principal, that's his money. So we probably need to reduce the amount of growth that he experienced by the amount of the fees. So let's go ahead and take the 413 and reduce it by the $86,870, leaving Joe with $326 net. Everybody should have a pen and a piece of paper somewhere on your table around you. If you don't, pull a piece of paper and a pen close to you, and I want you to write down a number for me that we're going to need if you want dessert. So everybody tell me when everybody has a pen and a paper ready, because I don't want to have to repeat the number over and over. Okay. So the number I want you to write down is $526,796. $526,796. Okay? That's the amount Joe has left over at age 90. Does everybody get that? We'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the original growth that he experienced before the fees of the $413,000. Now here's where you're going to take on board a new way of looking at fees. So this is important. So you had $413,000 of growth. He paid the $86,870 in fees, leaving him with $326. So the $86,000 was paid to generate the $413. That's the performance he was paying for, correct? Because he didn't need to pay $86,000 for his $200, because we all agreed he earned the $200. That's his money, right? So he paid the fee to generate the growth. So it makes sense to start looking at your fees as a percentage of the growth that you're paying the fees to generate. Does that make sense? So when we look at it that way, all of a sudden now you know why the tallest building in San Francisco belongs to a financial firm, right? 21% of his growth went to the house. Joe got to keep 79%. But Joe just didn't lose the 21% of his growth. He lost something else. Does anybody have any idea what else he might have lost? Anybody? Okay. Joe lost the opportunity to earn money on the dollars that he paid in the fees. Does that make sense? So there's a name for this. Economists call this lost opportunity cost. So what this means is, had Joe retained the 1% fee in his account and continued to compound that at the hypothetical rate of the 5% that we're using, he would have recovered this lost opportunity cost, or he could have earned more money. He could have actually earned, through age 90, another $63,000 had he been able to retain that 1% that he paid in fees. Does that make sense? So it's that compounding effect. And fees and lost opportunity cost tend to accelerate over time, as you can see here. So let's go full circle with this. Factoring in the lost opportunity cost, Joe lost over $150,000 to a 1% fee. So the $150,000 that came off the top, leaving us with the 326 and the 200, which is the number you wrote down, the 526, I'm sorry. So had Joe done it differently, instead of 526 $796, he could add $677,000 to 71 in his account, all by saving a 1% fee. So you may not be able to completely eliminate fees out of your existence or out of your portfolio completely, but you need to make sure, and this highlights how important it is that anything that you're paying a fee for, you need to be damn sure that you're getting an offsetting benefit for that that's greater than or equal to that fee. Does that make sense? Okay? So the big print giveth and the fine print taketh away. Where are these fees? So buried in your contracts, in the paperwork, in your statements at the back in small print, you'll see things like advisor fees, wrap fees, soft dollar cost, transaction cost, deferred sales charges, on and on and on. And it can go on for several pages. I could go on for several slides, different types of fees. The key thing that you need to take away from this is that it's important and there are advantages to reducing the fees. So first of all, if you reduce fees, it's going to allow for greater gains during the good years, right? It's also going to protect your principal when you have a flat market or a down market. Had Joe, when he started at that 200, had the market been flat, the fee would have reduced his 200 down to whatever, right? So in this case, it protects that principal. And then lastly, you earn money on the money that didn't go to fees. That's called that lost opportunity cost. You retain that and you're able to keep that. So now let's take a look at these fees by annuity type. So there's basically three types of annuities that are primarily used for retirement accounts. The first one is called a fixed annuity. So the first word in that is fixed. So why is that important? What does fixed mean? Anytime that there's the word fixed associated with an annuity, it means that the principal is protected and fixed and guaranteed by the insurance company, and you can't lose that principal. Does that make sense? So it's fixed. So annuity, there's good, bad, and indifferent annuities, just like there's good, bad, and indifferent real estate, just like there's good, bad, and indifferent ski boats. It doesn't make any difference. It means that there has to be the ability within the contract to take some type of an annuitization option, which means annual income. So as long as that's available in the contract, then that makes it an annuity, and it can only be issued by an insurance company, which can only be formed as an act of Congress. So if an insurance company issues a contract that gives you the ability to take annual income, and you have payout factors and everything available in the back of the contract, that's what makes it an annuity. Outside of that, there's hundreds and hundreds of different variations of the way these work. So they're not good, they're not bad, there's a large number of them. Okay, so it's similar to a CD, except it's not FDIC insured, but you have a protected principal and you earn a guaranteed level rate of interest. So for instance, you might have a 7-year, 3% contract, and it just means you're going to get 3% for 7 years, and then that's it. There's generally no fees or riders attached to these. So you basically don't have to be concerned about a lot of fine print. It just is going to pay you what it pays you, and that's it. Everybody got that one? The next one is fixed indexed annuities. So you still see the word fixed. Now, there's over 430 variations of fixed indexed annuities that we track through our software that we're going to be talking about. But they protect the principal, and they're generally tied, not directly invested in an index, but they're linked to an index. So you can experience index-linked returns, but your principal is protected. Now, there are some gotchas that you have to watch out for with fixed indexed annuities. The first and the biggest one is something called caps. So here's the way a cap works. If I can jump 30 feet straight up in the air, and the ceiling here is 13 feet, where am I going to break my neck? At 13 feet. So that's a cap, that's a limit. So the same thing with the contracts. If you have 10% growth from an index return and you have 25 or you have a 2.5% cap, you're going to stop at 2.5% regardless of what the index actually performs. The next one is something called a participation rate. So a participation rate works like this. If you have 10% gain from an index and you have 30% participation, you're going to get 30% of that 10, which is 3. Everybody have that? Then there's something sometimes added to these contracts called riders. So you have the basic benefits of an annuity contract as it's issued by the carrier. And then oftentimes you can add a rider, and it can be added just with a check mark. And a rider is anything that's added to externally to the base of that contract. It's an add-on. All right. How many people here have ever been to Best Buy? Okay. All right. So sure. So you walk into Best Buy, and maybe you want to grab a gift for your sister. So you go to the back and you see a Blu-ray DVD player or something. You grab it. You run up to the checkout. You start to check out. What is something that they always try to sell you in addition to the DVD player when you check out? Extended warranty. So here's the question. Is that a good deal for you or for Best Buy?
Best Buy.
Best Buy. Okay, so here's the takeaway. I want you to start thinking of any rider added to any of your investments or contracts or annuities as critically as you would think about being sold a extended warranty on the DVD player or the walkie-talkies that you lose the next week, right? Okay, so we'll go into these in another section. In fact, I have a section, it's so important, I have a section devoted to the most popular rider added to these contracts that generally cost 1%. We know how much that can affect you, and it's called an income rider. So if you've ever heard of anything that has like a 6% guaranteed account, or it's got 7% guaranteed or whatever, beware, it's probably one of these income riders. They're not all bad. There's a way to calculate it. We're going to talk about that. But on the whole, they're generally problematic, and I'm going to explain the math behind it. Okay? Which brings us to a different type of annuity that's called a variable annuity. Why do they call it variable? Because it can vary. Why can it vary? Because your money's invested directly in the stock market in something called sub-accounts. So the difference between a sub-account and a mutual fund is a sub-account is what they call basically a fund inside of an annuity. Okay? Those are called sub-accounts. Your principal is at risk, but probably the most defining feature of a variable annuity is the fees that you have to pay. How many people here have heard of Morningstar? Okay, everybody? So according to Morningstar, the fees inside of these annuities can range from 2 to 4%. Now, here's what's scary about these fees inside of the variable annuities. When you get your statement every quarter, usually the statements are very zeroed in on where you were last quarter and where you are this quarter. They don't give you the 50,000-foot view of what's going on. They also only show fees for any riders. The fees I'm getting ready to talk about are not on your statement. The only way you can get them is call the carrier and ask specifically, how much is my mortality and expense charge? Well, according to Morningstar, it's 1.25%. The next question you have to know how to ask them is, how much are my admin charges? And they'll say, well, that's around 0.28, which is about another 0.25%, but it's added on top of the expense charges. Then you say, well, what about my expense ratio charges? Now, did all of you know you need to ask these questions of your carrier? Probably not. Expense ratio fees, these are the management fees to actually manage those sub-accounts, okay, inside of the annuity. And this is not a fee that you're paying to your advisor for general advice or investment advice. This is actually an additional charge, and these charges are buried in the 90 pages of contract that you have that's stuck in the drawer, okay? So expense ratio fees, you add those up and it averages 2.50. Now these aren't my numbers, they actually are our numbers, but they're also Morningstar's numbers, 2.5 on average of these fees. Then if you have one of the most popular riders, and out of a multi-trillion-dollar market, 70% of all the annuities have some form of an income rider, which is an additional 1%. What is 1% plus 2.5%? 3.5%. Could you imagine the lost opportunity cost on 3.5% over a 30-year retirement? It makes you wonder, are those fees worth it to me in my scenario? Which is what you should be wondering which is the reason that we have the educational workshops that we do. So let's go back to Joe. Remember him? Joe took 100% of the risk because he put his money at risk with the advisory firm. He made 100% of the effort to accumulate the money to be able to invest in the first place. Now, so he's the one that put in the 30, 40 years to accumulate it, took all the risk, put it at risk. The advisory firm is not at any risk whatsoever. They even make fees if the account loses money, right? Because they get the whole account. He gets 79% of the gain. That's why we talk about this small cut sometimes can become something that we reference as death by 1,000 cuts. And this is not fear-mongering. This is just the simple reality that these things can add up and they can terrorize your account over time through just small, tiny cuts. Does that make sense? So if you don't know exactly how much you're paying in fees in the back of your contract, according to AARP, you shouldn't feel like the Lone Ranger because 8 out of 10 of us have no idea. All right? And these fees, once again, these are buried in the back of the contract. So our software that we utilize to calculate these fees does something very simple. We can take any statement, whether it be an IRA, an annuity, or 401k, whatever it is that you're working with, and we plug in the original amount of money that you invested in that investment. Then we calculate based on what product it is, which company it's with, of which we have 2,400 built into the software. And if we don't, we can go user defined and still run the calculation. So we calculate how much you've taken out in the form of money to you, and then how much do you have now. And we do this using a math concept called internal rate of return. Now, internal rate of return is something that we call the gold standard of finance. All that matters, it doesn't matter what's on the print, the brochures. What did I start with? What did I take out? What did I end up with? So everything we talk about tonight, we're going to be looking at it from the angle, what did I start with? What did I take out? What did I end up with? If you can learn to do that with everything you have going on, then you're going to be in a much better place and basically able to cut through everything and get right down to whether this is performing the way I want it to perform or this isn't. So many times I meet people that are spending an hour every Sunday cutting out coupons to save $200 a month on a constant basis on groceries and eating out and that type of thing. And while they're busy doing that, they just spent $1,300 in fees for things they're not even going to get any advantage from in the last 30 days. And I'm making those numbers up, but you get the idea. Because your investment accounts represent a large portion of your accumulated wealth by the time you're in retirement. You have your real estate, second would be your retirement accounts, right? So there you go. Or sometimes first is your retirement accounts and second is your real estate. So these small changes and adjustments and your awareness of this is probably one of the most valuable things from a financial angle that you can engage in. So now we're going to jump into volatility. I'm going to grab some water. Does anybody have a quick definition of volatility? Or how do you think of volatility? Anybody?
It does things you don't expect.
Change things.
Not stable.
Not stable. It's volatile. So we're going to break down volatility in a way that you really understand it. Volatility is much different once you go into retirement stage than volatility is when you're 30. When you're 30, your accounts go up and go down and you can just ride it out, and generally over the market cycles you're going to be okay, right? How many people here have heard of RMDs? What's it stand for? Okay. Does the IRS care whether you're having a good day or a bad day financially when it takes the RMDs out? No, they don't. So essentially, between that and then needing income to live on, volatility can affect you negatively in this way. If an account is down, by the way, how many people here were alive in 2008? How about 2002? Okay. If you're born after that, I got to take your wine away. Anyway, okay, so let's take a look at some of the ways that have been used to prevent this volatility. Because if you take money out of an account that's been hammered and is down, you're actually immortalizing that loss. Does that make sense? You're taking it out, you've taken it while your account is down, so you're taking the money out when the dollars are deflated. All right? So it's simple. So we need to really understand this in a way that you completely get it. But one of the ways to protect from volatility in 1994 is take 60% of your account, put it in stocks, 40% and put it in bonds. Now, they did something called a Monte Carlo simulation. And what it means is they took every single day over a period of time and they said, okay, if we started on January 1st, 1964, and we ran it 30 years, taking 4% using a 60-40 split, we didn't run out of money over 30 years. Then they went to January 2nd and said if we did that from 30 years, from January 2nd to January 2nd, 30 years, we didn't run out of money. And they did thousands of those, right? That's how they do Monte Carlo simulations. But once they set it up, they just run it, and it comes up with this rule, said, okay, we ran thousands of these and 4% works. You don't run out of money over 30 years, even though it may be rough in the middle, on average, you're going to be okay. So what happened to bond interest rates, do you think, in the next decade or so after they did this calculation? It went down, 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 right? Interest rates went down. So if 40% of the process is dependent upon earning enough interest from your bonds to carry the 40% of it to allow the withdrawals to happen, you think that create a problem eventually? So things change. So Morningstar, which we all know of, they recalculated this in 2013. They said it's not a bad thing, we just redid it, and it now is the 2.8% rule, which means if you have $1 million, if you're following this methodology, you can only withdraw $28,000 a year to make it through your retirement. So that's kind of a challenge, but that's what they're trying to protect you from is this. So here's exactly why you have rules like the 4% rule and why you have strategies like I'm going to show you after dinner. Okay? So here's a 10-year chart. And what I want you to visualize is for 5 years, over the 10-year period, the market goes up 10% for 5 of those years. On the opposite years, I want you to visualize the market going down 10%. Everybody follow me? So you went up for 5 years and down for 5 years. What's your average rate of return? 0. And that's true. That is actually your average rate of return. So here's where we have to really start thinking through this. Why then, if the average rate of return is 0, why then does $1,000 get reduced to $950?
Fees.
Fees? What else? Inflation? Taxes? Okay. Let's look at it this way. It's actually the math itself. And so here's the simple way of understanding this. So we had 1,000 and went down 10%, right? So let's follow this real close. If you have 1,000, you lose 10%. Does everybody see that takes you down to 900? So you're down to 900. Now the next year you gain 10%. But do you gain it on the 1,000 or the 900? 900. The 900, right? So 10% of 900 is 90. We only came up to 990. Now, there's an algorithm to figure out how you get back up to the 1,000. Now, I don't know the algorithm, but I can tell you the answer. If you lose 10%, you need 11 to get back up to even. Now, this is particularly important in the last 30 days, right? While we're all trying to gain the 11 to get back up to even, right? Okay, so if you lose 20, you would stand to reason that you would need 22 to get back up to even, right? It would stand to reason, but that's not true. You actually need 25 to get back up to even. That's why we didn't call it something else. We called it the dark side of compound interest. When you decide to get off this roller coaster of the volatility while you're doing withdrawals, the sooner you get off that roller coaster, the better your future is going to be in retirement. So the dark side says that 30%, you need 43 to get back to even, 40, 67 to get back to even, and 50, you need 100% to get back to even. Now, most of the room said they were alive in 2002 and 2008. So you might have seen something like this in your history, right? I've known a number of people that retired, they started their retirement during those down drops, and because of the fact that they had to withdraw money and maybe didn't have quite enough, they started running out of money at 10, 12, and 13 years that they thought was going to last 30 years. It can be totally random based on when you decide to start your retirement can make the difference on whether you make it 30 years, 40 years, whether you leave a legacy or whether you just get wiped out in the interim. So we are now going to have dinner, and I think they got it all ready. So we're going to break here for now, and we'll be back to you guys in about 20, 30 minutes after you eat and continue on. So thank you. I'll come around and ask individual questions while you guys are eating, make sure everything's all A-okay. So thanks. Thanks. How was dinner, everybody? Good. Fantastic. So we have a couple more sections we're going to jump through. This next section doesn't apply to everybody in this room, but you need to know this information because at some point in time you're going to be presented the opportunity to add one of these riders to your contract. Now, some of these riders are very good. It depends on the contract, depends on when it was issued, it depends on your age, depends on your life expectancy, and about 9 other factors. So we have a way of evaluating the effectiveness of an income rider that you have currently based on the parameters which you have and what you're trying to do with it. So we'll get into that. I'm going to talk about from the perspective of when 6% can actually be 2%. So the 6% is a guaranteed income rider account. So let's walk through this, and we're going to bring back out our favorite character, Joe. So this time, Joe's accumulated $200,000 through his age 65, and he decides he's going to invest it into a variable annuity. Now, Joe's excited about this annuity because he has the ability, when he turns 70, he can take something called guaranteed income for the rest of his life. Now, here's the way the annuity is actually working. There's several parts. His basic account, which is his real money, we're going to assume it's still earning 5% like we did in the other examples. His income account has its own guarantee. The income account is guaranteed to grow at 6% annually. Now, let me ask you a question just to see how educated everybody is on these types of investments. Do you think he can take the income account out and go buy a piece of real estate with it later on? No. It's only used, it's a fake account, and it's only used for accounting. When he reaches age 70, whatever dollar amount is in this account, he gets to take times 5%. Now that's called a payout factor. Now because there's 2 variables, you have your income account value and a payout factor, you can change either the numbers and get the same number. In other words, you could have 10% interest and a 2% payout is the same as 5% interest and a 5% payout. In other words, you can manipulate the numbers, so it's hard to know the effectiveness of your income rider. All that really matters is what is the guaranteed amount that you're going to receive. Remember, what did I start with? What did I receive? What did I end up with? So keep that in mind because that will never take you to a bad place if you're doing your math that way. He's still paying 2.5% in the M&E, which is the mortality and expense charges and admin and expense ratios. And for this income rider, he agreed to pay an additional 1% for the benefit of that rider. So what we want to do is we want to decide, was this a really great deal for Joe or not? Now remember, we showed Joe going through age 90. So let's go ahead and follow through with the example. I'm going to start with the income account at his age 65. So at 6% guaranteed, it grows to 212. Then it grows to 224, 238, 252, and finally 267,645. So this is his secondary account that's only used to do one thing, take times that 5% to decide how much he's going to receive in income. So let's go ahead and do the math. So we take the 267,645 times 5%. Joe's going to receive $13,382 for the rest of his life. Now at that point, once they make this calculation, guess what happens to that secondary account? It evaporates. It doesn't matter. All that ever really mattered was they're going to guarantee $13,382 at his age 70. Do you kind of get that? So now let's follow it through. So at 65, he started with $200,000, right? How much did he receive? He got $13,382 from age 70 to age 90. So through those 20 years, he received $267,640. That's what he received. Nothing else matters. He started with 200. He got $267,640 back. Now, because of the high fees, the 2.5% plus the 1%, 3.5% of fees against 5% growth, his real account evaporated about age 87. Does that make sense? But he still got to enjoy the guaranteed income all the way to age 70. So is that a good deal or a bad deal? Well, according to the software, his internal rate of return was 2.08%. Has anybody in here ever earned more than 2.08% on their own? Everybody? That's how hard it would be to match the income rider on your own. So let me make this even real simple. Joe's neighbor takes $200,000 at 65. They're both the same age. And she invests it and earns 2.08%. At age 70, she just starts simply taking withdrawals out of her account while continuing to earn the 2%. She would end up at the same place Joe did without needing to worry about all the fees and the contracts or anything. So what we're calculating here is the value of that income rider to Joe. It was worth 2.08%. Now, had Joe died at life expectancy around age 85, his internal rate of return would have been closer to about 1.2%. Had he lived to 95, it would have been around 3%. So the only way you can win in an income rider, if you call getting close to 3% a win, is live well beyond 90. How many of us want to count on living beyond 90 for all of our financial choices? Not very good. So that's kind of the way that works. So now we have an antidote to this. I've talked about all kinds of problems. Now I'm going to talk about a bit of a solution. What would happen if you took a very simplified view and approach to handling your income? We did, and we have the software to calculate this because there's several steps. We call it maximum withdrawals or maximize withdrawals. So here's the basics to this approach. One, you need to provide downside protection to protect you from volatility. We're going to use technology to calculate how much Joe can actually withdraw from 70 to 90 because we want to maximize that. Then we need to be in the right vehicle. Now, under the branch of fixed indexed annuities, there's a type of that we call a simplified accumulation annuity. And all it means to us is that there's no riders or any extras added to it. It's just focused on giving you downside protection and maximum growth. I'll show you an example of a variation of that I think is effective as we go through this. Now let's go back to this volatility. We want to provide that downside protection. So do you remember when we talked about how the 1,000 became 950 because of the small amount of volatility? What would happen if we took the down years where we went down 10% and we replaced those with a 0? So instead of going down that year, you went up 10, 0, up 10, 0. Do you think it would end up with any more money? Okay, let's take a look. All right, so it's the exact same market, exact same returns. We're just messing with the downside. We're making it a 0. So we call it the power of 0 because instead of 950, we end up with 1,610 in that same account. Now this, folks, this is completely hypothetical. I'm just showing you a math example here to educate you on the power of 0. So this feature is called a reset feature. So let's take Joe. He's now accumulated $200,000, and he kind of unlearned all these other strategies. And he said, you know what? I'm just going to simply take withdrawals. How can I maximize that? And so Joe plans to start taking these withdrawals at age 70. We're going to keep the math the same. He earns 5% on the account. He lets the whole account grow till age 70. And then he's going to start taking withdrawals at age 70, and they're just going to be deposited in his account automatically every month, just like a pension, right? He's going to provide himself maximum protection on the downside, and he's going to increase his income without these account draining riders. So let's follow this through. Joe's account starts at 200, and as he works his way to age 70, he's compounding at the 5% growth, 231 at age 68, 243, and finally Joe reaches 255, 256. So there's a big difference between Joe's account at age 70 and that income account. The first one is, it's Joe's money. If he wanted to take all the money and go do whatever else with it, he could. It's his principal. Okay? The second thing that's different is that he hasn't paid any fees or anything on this, so if he died, 100% of that money would be fully available to his beneficiaries. He hasn't lost anything at this point. So at age 70, we calculate, using our software, withdrawals starting at age 70 through age 90. Now what our software does is very unique. And we actually have a patent pending on this process, but it says with any given product, at any rate of return, how much can we withdraw and have the money last until any age we want. So we can run this age 85, age 90, age 95, age 110, whatever you want, and the software will kick out that number, and we can adjust it in 10 seconds. I can actually run this calculation on your annuity or IRA in 3 minutes right in front of you, and it's 100% accurate with over 800,000 lines of code. It is fully dialed in. All right, so we calculate these withdrawals. Joe can take out $20,482 starting at age 70. Now, is that, based on your memory, is that a little bit better than $13,382? A little. Okay, so final results, $200,000. Joe takes out $20,482 for the 20 years instead of $267. Remember, there's only the three things that's important. What did I start with? It's the same in all cases. What did I take out? Substantially different here. And what did I end up with? Well, $20,482, he ended up with $409,000 that he received at 5%. 267 versus 409, 41% increase. Not through the power of buying additional things, through the power of eliminating additional things. Does that make sense? You've probably heard of this in different areas of your life. Whatever you're experienced in life, it's usually the removal of things and the simplification that makes things work, not adding a bunch of stuff to it. Same thing, 41% increase. So how do you do this? Our software does this for you. Once again, we can do it with your current situation, or we can do it with a new situation. So now let's talk about what we recommend as far as the type of contracts that make sense for this type of investment. Our software analyzes over 1 billion of this monthly for advisors all across the country. So from that, we've been able to kind of see a lot of different types of results. Wouldn't you agree? We use something called a simplified accumulation annuity, and there's a couple things that are important. One, you want to make sure that you're attached to a diversified index of some type. That could either be the S&P, or it could be a couple indexes that represent a kind of a global representation. And I'm going to show you an example in a second. You need a high participation rate. Remember earlier I said participation rate of 30% on a 10% gain gives you 3%. I recommend 50% or greater. So we're going to talk about how that participation works, but I'm going to recommend 50% or greater participation for this strategy. Reset feature. Remember we showed the power of zero and that volatility? Let me explain reset so you really have it. Here's the way reset works. If you have $100,000, The market can only do three things in a 1 year period. It can go down, it can go sideways, or it can go up. Now, it can do any number of percentages on those, but that's only three things it can do, right? So you have the 100,000. If the market goes down because it started with 100,000 and your principal's protected, at the end of the year, it'd reset at the 100,000. If the market goes sideways, does the same thing. Because you started with 100,000, it would reset at the 100,000. Now, just to keep it simple, let's say the market went up and you earned 10% on the contract. What it would do is it would say, okay, that's greater than what we started with here, and it resets, and now your new baseline becomes 110,000. Why is this so important? How many people here are invested in the stock market in any way whatsoever? Pretty much everybody? It's been a good ride. So what do you call the money that you have in the stock market prior to selling it? What do you call those profits? There's a word for it. No, there's a word for the profits. How many people here had real estate in 2006 and had a pretty high value? And then they failed to sell their real estate? What do you call the buildup that you haven't realized yet? You haven't taken it. It's called paper profits. Paper profits. So if you're still in the market, everything that you have in there every day is a paper profit. So the paper profit changes with the market, right? When does it become a real profit? When you sell it, right? So every day you get to decide when you wake up during your retirement, is today the day that I continue to stay in the market? Do I add more money to the market? Do I take money out of the market? And then if I take the money out of the market, what do I do with that money to continue? Because I need some kind of growth forward because I have to retire and I need this money doing something. So you do this every day, whether you realize it or not. By the time you brush your teeth, you've already thought through this. Every day you have to think through this. Reset eliminates that problem forever because your principal's protected. When you have a gain, it resets and takes the paper profit and makes it a real profit. If the market goes down, no sweat. You can be on a cruise ship. You don't have to worry about it because the market reset at that last level. That make sense? That's why we use the reset feature, and that's why we talk about the power of zero. No riders. We don't add any of this stuff. We don't do any extended warranties. We don't do any life insurance riders. We don't do anything. You don't add anything to your investments, right? You don't buy IBM stock and buy a rider for it, right? You just have IBM stock. Same thing with the annuity. So let's talk about one of these strategies that is a simplified accumulation annuity to give you an idea of how these can be structured. And this is kind of interesting. And one of the benefits of some of the increased regulation over the last 5 years is that carriers have made more consumer-friendly products that perform better. And what really excites me are actually simple. So let's go ahead and talk about how you can diversify across the global indexes. So this strategy is represented by the S&P, which represents 50% of the global strategy. The Euro stocks of the total strategy represents 30%, and the Hang Seng is represented by 20%. So that's 100% of the strategy. So let's take a look at last year. Last year, the S&P did 19.42. 50% of that is 9.71. Euro stocks did 6.49, 30% of that is 1.95. And the other part of the strategy, the Hang Seng, did 35.99. I guess we should have had it all in that last year, right? 20% of that is 7.20. So you add this credited rate over here, and it's actually 18.86. Now you get a participation rate times that amount, and in this case, 70% participation, leaving a 13.20 profit on that would be added to this account at the annual reset. Now that's pretty good considering there was really no risk of losing any money. Wouldn't you agree? Had you been straight in the stock market like many of you were, you actually probably might have done better than that last year just straight in the stock market. But every day you get to wake up and you get to say, am I going to earn another couple percent today or this week? Or is this thing going to be like 2002 and 2008 and tumble back down? What do I do? What do I do? This eliminates that. You get the majority of the upside. Now, why don't you get 100% participation on these arrangements? Because they have to take part of the index process. Part of the profits go to buy downside protection, which is actually options against the downside of the market. They hedge that. So you got the guarantee of the insurance company, the guarantee of your principal. You get to participate in the market on the upside, and you can't lose any of your money. So it's a very, very sophisticated process. Many of you in this room could probably do this on your own. It only takes about 40 to 50 hours a week. Okay, so 13.20 is not bad on that. So let's take a look over the last 20 years. The first example on this, I'm going to show you 100,000 over 20 years using a capped S&P product. So this had, we talk about the cap. This had a 6.3% cap, and so 100,000 managed to grow to 221,977. And this is not bad. This is pretty good with no downside. Beats the bank badly, beats bonds. It's a very, very good strategy. However, if you go to the global diversification and you remove the cap with the 70% participation, the same 100,000 would have grown to 455. Now, what interest rate did we use for Joe that beat the income rider? What growth rate did we use? 5. So we're trying to be conservative here. This strategy earned 8.14 over 20 years. So that's the type of strategies available. Still, when we do these calculations, we make sure that we use ultra-conservative assumptions on the growth. We don't want to overplay what the market's doing, and we don't want to pretend that the market's going to continue to act in a way it has over the last 20 years over the next 20 years. So I want you to ponder that for a second, and Harry, let's bring out the cheesecake. Everybody want some cheesecake? Okay. We'll be back with you in a couple minutes while we get the cheesecake out. Okay, we don't need to clap this time. Okay, does everybody have their cheesecake? Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up with a little comic strip I like. How's the Mars spaceship project going? Good. I picked our worst employees to be on the first flight just in case it explodes. Well, good thinking. We have 2 ways to win and no way to lose. So that's what we have basically available to everybody in this room tonight. We have created 2 ways for you to win and 0 ways for you to lose. So the first way that you can win is that we can do a 15 to 30 minute evaluation. It's in your home over the next 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Monday. We've blocked off time to meet everybody in the zip code area to do an initial meeting, to do one of these quick reviews for you to evaluate your situation. So what does that mean? So this is something we call a performance snapshot. I'm going to walk through it real quickly just so you can kind of get a feel for it, but it's really powerful. We show the annuity type or investment type, the company, the product. In this case, this gentleman invested $200,000 in January of 2010. He's taken out, remember, what did I start with? What did I take out? He took out $23,450, and he ended up with, which is at the date of this statement, $238,390. So we've entered in what we need. What did I start with? What did I take out? What did I end up with? But our software has over 2,400 various companies and products built into it, so it grabs the fees associated with that product, specifically the fine print and the 90 or 100 pages direct, and we have that to do the calculation. So then here's what it tells us. He had a gross rate of return, this is before expenses, of 6.37. So his total growth was 109,967. His total fees and charges, however, were 2.62, resulting in fees and charges of 48,136. Jackson National, by the way. 43.77 is the fees as a percentage of growth. So what we did is we took the 48,136, and that's the percentage that it represents of the $109,000 growth. So instantly we have a metric there to evaluate what's going on. And what it tells us is this, in just simple language, how much went to the house, how much did I get to keep, right? So if you were in Vegas and 43% went to the house and you got to keep, that would be just like Vegas, right? So same thing. So his net growth was 61,840. So his internal rate of return on this was 3.61. Now, that's during the longest bull market in history, with as much exposure to the downside of the market as just investing straight into stocks. So was this a winning combination for him? Should he continue to do this? Okay, that's what our software can tell you. So that's what we can evaluate with your current contract. Now, if that number said 7.42 internal rate of return, and he liked the setup and everything was fine, and was willing to go ahead and continue taking the risk, that might have been pretty good. You say, okay, that's doing pretty well. Then his only decision is, do I want to continue being exposed to the downside? Is there a safer way to get 7 or 8% or 6% return than continuing to have that downside protection? So either way, the other thing we can do is we can evaluate your income rider and figure out, like we did at Joe, whether you're going to earn 2.08 based on your exact contract, or whether that's going to be 4% or 5% or 6% or 7%. It's different for everybody, 2,000 variations. If it's good and it's going to have an IRR at age 90 or 95 of 7%, I'm going to say, whoa, I want one. And you can split it with me. Well, I'll buy half of it. So that's what we can do with the performance data. The second thing that we can do is we can compare to the newest alternatives in the market, these simplified contracts like we were talking about, and we won't know whether that makes any sense until we do part one to see kind of where you are. Does that make sense? If you like what you see with the simplified version, that's the other way our firm can make money, is if you do that, we have all these products available and the carriers pay us a commission, just like they did whoever put you in your original contract, only our products are the low fees, lowest commission products, fully transparent, you know everything, and it doesn't come out of your money. So if we get paid a commission, it's paid by the carrier, it doesn't come directly out of your principal, like if you're paying a stock market fee or something like that. So that's the way we get paid. It's the second way we can benefit you. But the first meeting, no obligation, no cost, no anything. We evaluate your situation. If you like where you're at and we can make that work, that's great. If you want to take a look at the new situation, that's great.
Okay, now that you've watched the seminar video, what's next? Well, there's two things. If you have a variable annuity right now, we can do an annuity x-ray. As you saw in the video, we have some special software that we can input some information. We can show you exactly what the fees are, how they affect your rate of return, and do a snapshot of your current variable annuity. Okay, the second thing is if you don't have a variable annuity, but you would like to know where to find an annuity without the high fees of a variable annuity, then that's the second thing we can do. Now, to do both of these things, what we can do is schedule a call with me. So what you want to do is you want to go to www.xraymyannuity.com, and there will be a couple links on there where you can click on to see my calendar, and you can schedule a time where we can get together on the phone and discuss about your annuity and also any other questions that you might have. Okay, so again, my name is Marcus Vandermark. Go ahead and do that now, and look forward to talking to you real soon about your options and taking a look at your current variable annuity.